Perfect. So moving on with question 5. So the question is, we got new data for the month of August. Append that to existing data. Now let's look at a very realistic data analytics scenario. Until now, we have been working with our existing hotel dataset covering May, June, and July. But imagine we are now in August and the business sends us a new file containing the latest August booking data. Now, we don't want to replace our historical dataset. We want to add these new records to it so that our analysis can continue with the latest information. But before appending anything, there's an important rule. Never assume that a new file has exactly the same structure as your existing dataset. So first, we're going to load it, inspect it, compare it with our existing data, and only then append it. So first we write the code df_august is equal to pd.read_csv bracket datasets hash new data august.csv, and then we have done the head. So what is this? So first I am actually creating a new data frame called df-august. So on the right hand side, I am telling Pandas to read data from a CSV file into a data frame, and inside the brackets, I've provided the path of our new August file. So in simple terms, I'm saying Pandas, take this new August CSV file and load it into Python as a data frame called df_august. So immediately after loading the file, I use head3, which gives me the first three rows, because I want a quick visual inspection. As you can see, I can immediately see property information, city, room, category, check-in date, successful bookings, capacity, occupancy percentage. I can also see that the records belong to 2022. So this gives me an initial confirmation that I have loaded the correct file. Let's do the step 2, which is compare the columns. So as you can see, we have df_august.columns. df_august is a data frame we just created, and df.columns, which is the existing data frame. So then we do the when we write the code, that shape basically shows us the rows and the columns. But before that, as you can see, in df_august.columns and df.columns, there's a bit of difference. That is, it's very minor, but it's very, it can be a major problem. So as you can see, we have to append data, right? But the columns should be named similar. As you can see, this is occupancy percentage. This is written in a different way, and this is written in a different way. And I've also realized that in df.columns there's date, but here there's no date. There's check-in date, but the date column and the check-in date column obviously are different, right? So as you can see, then we do the shape. So in the shape, we see that we have 7 rows and 13 columns. And in the existing data frame, we have around 6,497 rows and 14 columns. So you can remember, like, shape gives us two numbers, rows first and column second, right? So Here we have 6,497 rows and 14 columns in the existing data frame. Now, this gives us an important expectation before appending anything, right? We have 6,497 existing records and 7 new August records. Therefore, after appending them, I should expect around 6,504 rows. So this gives us a validation check for later. This is much stronger of a concept for concat. Yep. So anyway, moving on to step 4, where we append August using pd.concat, and as you can see, we have taken the latest data frame. So I'm ready to append the new August records. Concat. First of all, what is concat? Concat is concatenate, essentially combining data set together. Remember that. Concat means concatenate, which essentially combines data together. You may ask why df or df.august? Because inside concat, I provided a two data frames I want to combine, right? First is df, that's the existing data frame, and the newly created data frame, which contains our newly received August data. And importantly, the order matters for reliability. Existing records come first, always, and the new August records are added afterwards. So now what does access is equal to 0 mean? So this basically tells Pandas how I want to combine the data sets. Access is equal to 0 means vertically add rows underneath rows. That's exactly what we want here because August represents new observations. We are not trying to add information beside every existing record. We are adding completely new records underneath them. So if we are combining data horizontally as additional columns, that would be a different operation. But here we are expanding the data set through additional rows, so access is equal to 0 is appropriate. What does ignore index is equal to true mean? Now you see both data frames already have their own row indexes. If I simply concatenate them, Pandas can preserve those original index values, potentially giving us duplicate index numbers. But those indexes don't carry business meaning here. So that's why we use this code, ignore index is equal to true. It basically tells Pandas to ignore the old row indexes and create a fresh continuous index for the combined data set. Then we have uh, done latest data df, that is latest data frame dot tail, which gives the last 10 rows of the table. So after appending, notice I've not used head this time. I used tail. Why? Because the new August records were appended to the bottom of our data set. So head would just show me the whole list record at the top. Tail shows the last records, which is exactly where I expect the newly appended August data to appear. So here you can see. So from 6,497 rows onward, we have the newly appended August data set. Now, let's look at the August row. I see some mistakes here. I don't know if this is a mistake or not. So this in the occupancy percentage is NA. Okay. So because this contains NaN because we didn't basically do the checking of like because here it's like occupancy PCT and here it's occupancy percentage. So because of the mismatch, there's NaN symbol here. Even in the date symbol also, because date is present here, but it's not present here. So yeah. So during concatenation, it treats them as separate columns, and which gives that problem. Okay. Let me also see if there's something else. So then we do the next code, which is shape, exactly to confirm. This is like probably the most valuable part of the whole exercise. So now here's something very interesting. Our original data set had 14 columns and August had 13 columns. But the combined data set has 15 columns. Now, this might initially look very strange, but the reason is that concat doesn't simply count columns. It aligns them according to their column names. Now you see, because occupancy PCT exists in one dataset and occupancy percentage exists in another, Pandas treat those as two separate fields. And because date exists in a historical dataset but not in August, Pandas still retains that August and fills the missing August variable with NaN, right? So this is a perfect example of why checking column structure before appending data is so important. Now, you see, after we get the rows and the columns here, I think from a row perspective, the append has worked perfectly, and the column also tell us that our schemas weren't perfectly aligned. So that's why validation shouldn't stop at simply checking whether the code executed without an error. You see, code running successfully doesn't necessarily mean the data is correct. It's a super, super important thing to remember, okay? So what would I do like in a real project? You may ask me. So in the production analytic workflow, I would standardize the schemas before concatenating. For example, I would rename the occupancy percentage to occupancy PCT and ensure that required data field is populated consistently. Then I would append data sets that prevent duplicate business fields and unnecessary null values. So, yeah, the most important thing is don't blindly fill date just to eliminate NaN. First, understand what date means and whether check-in date should map to it. Okay. So, from a business perspective, this workflow matters because data sets are really static. A hotel analytics teams might receive new booking occupancy data every day, every week, or every month. So instead of rebuilding the analysis from scratch, we append new observations to our historical data set. But before doing that, we validate the schema before the source systems can change column names, formats, or available fields over time. Maintaining that consistency is what keeps the downstream reports and dashboards reliable. So we use the head to inspect new records and confirm that we loaded the correct data. Then we compare dot columns between new and existing data sets to understand whether its structures were compatible. So yeah, we have used pd.concat to vertically append August to a historical data set. Axis is equal to 0 told pandas to add rows, while ignore index is equal to true created a fresh continuous index. So yeah, the biggest lesson from this exercise, as you can see, is not to simply use how, like not simply how to use concat, It's that whenever new data arrives, we should inspect, validate, and standardize it before trusting the combined data set. So data validation tells us whether the result makes business sense. So super, super important to validate it before concatenating it. So I hope you learned something from it. Thank you so much for watching. This is just we had in the last question afterwards, and then we'll finish this hospitality data analytics project. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Hope you learned something from